and you get on. And people were saying, oh, it's, it's psychology and body language, and people would always choose mine. And it's the methods that they came up with. And, if they watch this lecture, they're going to be very disappointed when they realise I just cheated. But before I actually show you how it did, I'd like to explain why this came about, because I think the reason why it came about is almost as important as the fact that it did come about. And what happened was I told you earlier about touring with this comedian friend of mine, and he tours about every couple of years. He tours, and I tour with him, and he's been doing it for about 12 years, and I've always been his opening act. So the audience have got to see me a lot. So every time I open for him, I only do 30 minutes, but I've got to do a different thing. So I was working out for a tour, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and thinking about what I wanted to do. And I'd read this book called, I'd seen this trick called Persuasive Bank Night, and I think it's by Sean Taylor in his book Brainstorms. And it was a trick where it was a bank night routine. The method was a standard method, just actually having the money in a thumb tip. But it used words on the envelopes and a picture, and one envelope was a different colour, I think. He had a picture of a flower on one and a dollar sign and some words. And I really like the idea of just that idea of not having numbers on the envelopes, having something other than numbers on. And I thought it'd be great to do it with purely just words and play on the idea of playing with words. A little bit like the trick, this, that, and the other, the close-up trick, and various other tricks that have been done playing on words. And I hadn't fully worked out the routine, but I was thinking about the wording and what the words would be. And I was just going to use the method of a folded-up note in a thumb tip. And I was driving to a gig, and I've got a good friend in the UK called Pete Furman. And we often, chat to each other about what we're working on, now and again. And I was talking to him, and he said, "What are you doing on the next tour?" And I said, I'm thinking of doing a bank night routine, but just using words and playing around with the words. He said, "Oh, great." He said, "What method are you using?" I said, "I'm just going to take the money out of a thumb tip, at the end." And he just said, "Are you happy with that?" And I went, "Yeah, of course I am. That's fine." And then he hung up. But of course, as soon as he said, "Are you happy with that?" it made me ask the question. It's that nagging thing. It's like what your wife does to you. They do that, don't they? They ask really probing questions and then just go and sit in the room and let you sort of stew on it. And, I remember once walking into, this is different, walking into the living room at my house. We were going out, and we had friends who we were going out with, and I'd been upstairs, and I'd put a shirt on, and I came, and I walked into the living room, and my wife said, "Are you going out in that shirt?" And I went, "Obviously not," and just turned round. Right? They've got a good thing of asking certain questions, haven't they? But he just said, the very fact that he said, "Are you happy with that?" made me think. And I thought, actually, I'm not happy with that. The truth is, I don't think it looks great when you have an envelope this big and you take a folded up note from inside. The truth is, we're fooling ourselves as magicians if we think that looks good. Okay? And we do that a lot. A method works. It might not look great, but it works, so we do it. Right? I've never been a fan, if I'm honest, of tearing a corner off a bill to remember it, to mark it. I've never understood why that makes sense. Nobody in the world, outside of magic, ever says, "Look, so we'll recognise this again, let's tear the corner off." Doesn't make sense, does it? But we do it because it fits the method that we're using. I think if you're going to have a note that's then recognised later, I think a signature is much better. It's much more natural. Sign it, make it your own. I think tearing a corner off does make sense sometimes. Don't get me wrong. There are times when it does make sense if you're doing a torn and restore, or if whatever. But methods that we use don't always make sense. And as soon as you said this, I thought it doesn't make sense. So then what happened was, to create the trick, I just thought about what the ideal scenario would be for me. And I think that's a great way of approaching creating magic, is to say, how would I want this to look if I did it for real? And so I thought, for real, if I did this, I'd want it to, I'd want the note to come out unfolded. Because normally when you put money in envelopes, I used to get gifts from my grandmother, a birthday card. She doesn't send them now because she's dead. But when she was alive, she used to send me birthday cards, and she'd put money in. Yeah, you remember that? You get gifts, but it wouldn't be folded into a little small package. The money would just be in there loose. So I thought, I want to take the money out, and at the very most, folded in half I would allow. That was my rule. And then I thought, I don't want to have any body loads. I don't want to have to use a tray to put the envelopes on. I just want to have the envelopes. And at the end, the last envelope, I take the money out, unfolded. And I also thought, it'd be nice to be able to take more than one note out. because having several notes out makes it look like you've had to manipulate so much more than one note. Okay, so that was my criteria. And the method came about purely from just going to Staples and buying some envelopes. And I was very lucky that the envelopes I bought had a specific design about them that meant that I came up with this method. If the envelopes, if I'd bought a different style of envelope, I may never have come up with this design, just because of the way the envelopes were designed. I'll show you in a moment. In fact, they're quite hard to get the right envelopes for this. They are manufactured now, fortunately. You can buy these envelopes from your favourite magical supplier. The way it works is the envelopes that I use, the reason they work is that they have quite an acute angle on this bit that's folded up. I don't know if I hold that so it's not shining in the light so much. So it's a little bit reflective, isn't it? Let's me get out the way again. It likes it when I get out the way. I don't think you can see this side seam, can you? But there's a side seam just up here, which is at quite an acute angle. Some envelopes have the seam coming across here, you know, like in a triangular shape. These come up here. And that's good because this masks the gimmick that I use. So when I bought these envelopes, I noticed that seam and I started cutting them along that seam. And I made a little pocket, and that's the method. The method is quite simply this. That is the method. It's not... Penn and Teller, when the guest, they said, we think you have an extra envelope. And sort of, I do, I suppose. But it's not really an envelope, it's a pocket. And they said they think I slid the money out of the extra envelope and put it into the correct one. That was their guess. And I could quite confidently say, if you watch the clip, I don't slide any money out, in or out of any envelopes. I don't. I just use this. And the money stays in there throughout the whole routine, and it comes out of there at the end. But the nice thing about it is that when this is held up against an envelope, because these side seams sort of match up, it means I can go in and appear to take it out. That is improved by the fact that I use some repositional glue on one side. The glue that I use is, there are two types I've found in the UK. You can certainly get this one in the US. This is Zig repositional two-way glue. Okay, I know you can get this in America because Michael Weber lent me some once that he'd bought over here, so you can definitely get that. And then another one that I use is this is really easy to get in the UK, and this is Bostik sticky pen. Okay, Bostik sticky pen. It's a little bit worn out. I've used this quite a bit. The nice thing about these glues is they go on, but then they stay sticky, so it ends up being a little bit like a post-it note. That is tacky. Even though the glue's dried, it stays tacky. You can use it like normal glue, put it on, and while it's wet, glue something together. Or you can put it on and let it dry. And it takes about maybe 3 or 4 minutes to dry. And it's just along that one edge. Now, people have got in touch with me and said, I'm using post-it glue. You know, like the little post-it sticks of glue that you can get. And it's not working. It won't. I've tried every type of glue. You want this type of glue. You can't use like a spirit gum or anything like that. It needs to be this repositional glue, and not the post-it note type glue. That doesn't work in the little sticks. I've tried that. The nice thing about this is it sort of stays tacky, but it's not going to stick until you want it to. Okay, and I'll show you the handling. So this little pocket is made from one of the envelopes. If you can get the right envelopes, and basically what you need is envelopes that have a square flap and these acute angles here. And what you do is you actually cut your gimmick out of one of the envelopes like this. And it's slightly smaller, slightly narrower width than the whole envelope. So you come in maybe, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch in from each side and cut in. And you want it so that it's on one side, the opening is taller than the other, okay? So when that's against the envelope and your finger goes in to grab the notes, it can access them. Obviously, if it's the same on either side, it's hard to get your finger in and grab them. So that's the gimmick. And again, I've rounded off the corners. The actual envelopes, if you're making this up yourself, the actual envelopes, the opening, if I put my finger in here, I've cut this back about just under 1/2 inch. So I've made the opening bigger than it was. Okay, I actually pull them apart at the seams. I cut it down about 1/2 inch, and then I re-glue them. Okay, that